Thank you all so much for joining us. We're really excited to speak to your management team, and we're very excited to present our final case analysis and our strategic analysis of your potential business model for Bespoken Spirits, who will be ushering in the new age of whiskey. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our team. I myself am Melissa Klanovich, and I have experience as a biotech consultant. We've got Sharon Vexler, who has experience in food procurement and distribution, Erin Scharnweber, who is in higher education fundraising, Zoe Faki, who is a very proud student and athlete, and Valerio Coronella, who has experience with marketing and video creation. So really quickly, I'll just guide you through the table of contents. We'll be discussing background recommendations, implementation, some alternative solutions for you, and then providing you with our analysis and reasoning for all these things. And I'd like to emphasize that when we were going through these analyses and discussing all of our conclusions and recommendations, the entire team was very involved, but for the sake of simplicity, we've sliced up who will be talking about what. So I'll begin with a little bit of our understanding of the company background and some of the key issues. So Bespoken Spirits is going to be disrupting the whiskey technology and distribution trade using their activation technology that they've patented and is very proprietary to them. They're innovators with a passion for the craft, and you have created this mixture of using technology in the modern day and combining it with the tradition of whiskey making. It's very obvious that you're all very passionate about whiskey, and you'd like to make it more accessible to people like millennials who have definitely shifted in their preference. And that's probably due to the fact that millennials have become a little bit like whiskey themselves, aged. So in order to place you correctly in whatever industry we had to analyze, we first went through and attempted to define some industries in which whiskey could be a product. So obviously, alcohol and the hard spirits industry was the first thing that came to mind. Also, because of your activation technology being a very high value add for your company, we thought maybe it might be beneficial to keep our perspective a little bit in the technology industry as well as we go through these analyses. And lastly, we considered entertainment as being an industry in which you might compete, although we later decided that whiskey is a little bit more of a complement to entertainment than it is a competitor, considering especially pouring yourself a nice glass of whiskey for Netflix or dinner, or taking shots with your friends while you play Mario Kart. Um, Ultimately, you probably want to know how you would utilize your activation technology best. And we've decided that since you are such a different whiskey company, you can't enter the market the same old way and end up with the same old results as most companies, which is, failure usually. But my colleague Erin will be really thoroughly going through our recommendation, but I just like to emphasize that you'll have to consider a different method of approach to your business model. So now Erin can discuss the recommendations.
Thank you so much, Missy. All right, to kick off our recommendation, I first want to walk you through the group map of the spirit industry, as this is a crucial piece of understanding your positioning in the industry. As you can see, the industry is overly saturated and competition is fierce. You have done a great job of positioning Bespoken and creating a unique value proposition of producing high quality whiskey in a very innovative way. You have been able to distinguish yourself from the Captain Morgans and the Southern Comforts of the industry, but there are certainly a handful of other companies that are breaking away from the sea of competition. Companies like Jack Daniel's are partnering with Coca-Cola to make canned, ready-to-go cocktails, and Cleveland Whiskey is experimenting with pressure aging to speed up the distilling process. That being said, this is certainly a useful analysis to understand who your true competitors are, and this tool helped us guide our recommendation. That being said, after extensive industry research and analyzing various financial information, we recommend that you move forward with the maturation as a service business model. We are confident that this is the most strategic business decision for you for a handful of reasons. First, as I just showed, competition is extremely high in the business to consumer whiskey industry. In order to be successful in the B2C industry, this will require exponential startup costs, and marketing costs it's likely to take up to 10 years in order to see positive operating margins. On the other hand, the number of new whiskey distilleries and producers is climbing each year. Therefore, by focusing on technology and transitioning to a business to business focus, you will have an opportunity to capitalize on the growth of the industry without the direct competition. The second reason why we believe the maturation business model is the best path forward is because this service will provide a solution to an industry need. There are a handful of problems in the distilling industry, and the main ones are the long aging process, the financial challenges associated with this process, the lack of sustainable distilling options, and the complex chemistry. Maturation Services provides a solution to each and every single one of these issues. Breweries, distilleries, and rectifiers will be able to save as much as 50 to 70% of the total cost in up to 5 years in the distilling process. This not only means cost savings, but it also means that companies will have a faster time to revenue. As I just mentioned, with the growing number of newer firms entering the market, this will be crucial in order to ease the financial burdens facing newer firms in the early years of operations. Additionally, the traditional distilling process has many environmental challenges, as most barrels have to be discarded after each use. Again, the maturation process can solve this issue, as your technology requires less than 3% of the wood and less than 1% of the energy compared to barrel-aged whiskey. Lastly, the maturation service will allow companies to refine poor quality spirits that did not turn out as planned, as well as create newer products to keep up with the changing customer demands without having to wait several years. As you can see, the maturation service will be a problem-solving powerhouse for the distilling industry, and this service is greatly needed. The final reason why we are recommending that you move forward with the maturation service is because this is the lowest capital risk of all the alternatives and provides the most flexibility. The activation technology provides a sustainable competitive advantage for your company. You've already filed for the 10 patents and your technology is ready to be put to use. Now is the time to capitalize on this competitive advantage and introduce it to the market at large. The maturation business model will allow you to take advantage of this untapped market space and disrupt the whiskey distilling industry as we know it. We are very confident that this strategic business decision will provide the greatest long-term success. Moving forward with the maturation business model, we recommend that you utilize a blue ocean strategy by combining differentiation and cost leadership. The maturation service will allow a completely new and innovative solution to the traditional barrel-aged process. By offering high quality and innovative whiskey, you are separating yourselves from the sea of competition and changing what is possible, which is why a blue ocean strategy will be the best approach. We will discuss the implementation process shortly, but first I did want to point out the value chain that will make this maturation business model possible. As you can see, the first value chain shows the primary activities of a traditional whiskey distillery company, such as Jack Daniel's. The primary activities are to purchase the raw materials, prepare those raw materials to get ready for distillation and aging, and then bottle the finished product and sell it to various retailers and distributors. You will notice that the value chain for your maturation model is significantly different. Your primary activities are marketing your service, acquiring breweries, distilleries, and rectifiers as customers, processing your customer spirits, and completing any post-purchase maintenance and customer service needs. The clear differences in these value chains highlight exactly how you are disrupting the industry and differentiating yourselves among such a saturated industry. I will now toss it to Missy, who will discuss how we recommend implementing the maturation business model.
Thank you, Erin, for providing such a thorough explanation of our recommendations for their business model. So I'll be discussing the implementation strategy, but really quickly, I'd like to again touch on some things that Erin already brought up, which includes that the number of producers and the volume produced per thousands of cases has been steadily increasing over the last few years. And we've provided a projection for you on the high-end premium whiskey sales by volume and the super premium whiskey sales by volume, because these would be your main customers. The producers of these things would benefit the most from using your maturation for their process, and they would be able to cut their costs and turn products over more quickly. And this is just a really positive reason on why you should be able to go into the maturation as a service model and find as many customers as you might need to produce your 12 million bottles. So we'll quickly discuss this very basic timeline that we've created. For year one, you're going to implement your maturation as a service business model, and that's going to require you to have and acquire customers. And then hopefully over the first 5 years, you'll be able to find enough people to sell your 100,000 casks of whiskey. And then at year five, you'll be able to profit from your first round of maturation. At that point, you'll be able to assess how much capital you have, and you can maybe begin to implement a customization as a service business model. Because of your relationships that you built with the producers over the first 5 years, you might be able to then branch out and offer them maybe some slightly more customized products, and then maybe branch out into restaurants or event industries. At year 10, you'll have had 10 years of products that have been provided through the maturation as a service model, 3 years of customization experience, and you can conduct a very in-depth 10-year profit and growth revenue analysis so that by year 11, we can entirely help you reassess the whiskey B2C industry to determine a potential diversification strategy into this using a lot of the liquid capital that you have generated over the past 10 years. And next, I'd like to really quickly discuss this a little bit more granular implementation schedule. In year one, you're going to have two very big things that'll have to happen, but through your vice president of marketing. You'll have to publicly announce your company business model shifting to a more technological focus and launch your marketing campaign so that you can acquire the customers who are these whiskey producers that you'll need to service. Within the first few years, you'll have to secure initial partnerships and focusing on those craft and large breweries that are growing and producing the highest volume of whiskey, as we showed in the charts. And this will be done through your CEO and your sales team that you'll have to hire on. At year three, your data and sales teams will have to check in with the industry and do some more analyses to ensure that things are going smoothly. By year five, you'll be able to seek feedback from your customers and use this feedback to improve your technology. And your customer service R&D team and VP of technology can then do a deep dive on the feedback that you get. At year seven, you can assess for customization as a service, and your CFO and CEO can make and reassess other long-term goals. I'd also like to go over a quick net cash flow graph that we've provided for you. And you can see that although you'll be accumulating a negative debt for the first 4 years, you'll end year four with about $79 million, well, about $80 million of debt from your wholesale per bottle sales and maturation. But at year five, should you be able to sell those 12 million bottles, you'll be able to make back $127 million, resulting in a $45 million net cash flow. And then just to break down your cost analysis and budget a little bit more, to start this business model, we kind of determined that it would cost around $6 to $10 million. And using 6 as our baseline for this budget, your equipment and creating your activators will cost you about $2.4 million, with creating the first one at $100,000, and then ramping up to create your future model, which will be a $50,000 model, but will be able to produce 10 times the number of bottles per week and ultimately per year. Your sales team will inevitably cost you around $1.8 million. Your selling general administrative costs will be about $900,000. Marketing should be about $600,000, and tech and maintenance will only really be around 5% of your total budget. And now I'll pass it to Sharon, who will be able to discuss the alternative solutions that you can also consider.
Great. Thanks so much, Missy. That was a great explanation of our implementation process. Very insightful. So as Missy said, let's address some of the alternative solutions that you may have considered throughout this process. Those two would be product-based company and customization as a service. Starting off with customization as a service, that's when you customize a small batch for other businesses or consumers for their special events or needs, like showcased in the picture. However, let's start with some of the pros of using this approach. So recent polls show 36% of shoppers prefer customized items over traditional products in the stores. So product customization is increasing in popularity across a wide range of consumers. Some people are simply more likely to buy something if they can personalize it to their liking. This appeals to that growing demand for product customization. Many e-commerce platforms have created unrealistic delivery time expectations among consumers. Some expect next day or even same day delivery. However, Online shoppers are willing to wait a bit longer for products that can be customized, therefore allowing you as a company to set more realistic expectations and achieve them. Lastly, offering customization means that you are able to construct a database full of customer preference data, and then that data can be leveraged on for more personalized marketing and sales strategies. So even though this all sounds very positive, there are some consequences to consider. So let's address some of those next. First, CAS is extremely costly and tricky to implement. Why is that? Well, simply put, building a design prototype and optimizing it across multiple iterations can be particularly intensive and expensive. This leads to negative effects on manufacturing efficiency. It's extremely difficult to predict all of the possible combinations of designs that users may construct and deliver them on time. So as I mentioned before, many e-commerce platforms have created unrealistic expectations among consumers. Combining that with not being able to provide a no questions asked return policy, which most consumers are used to in their typical risk-free shopping experience, may result in low customer satisfaction and deter some users. Lastly, there are low expectations from consumers. Recent polls show yet again that only 16% of interested customers anticipate companies would be able to provide well-created, customized products today. As the vast majority of consumers are not happy with the collection and usage of their personal information for offering more personalized products, CAS business models implemented without previous relationships between producers and consumers lead to low customer retention and lack of consumer satisfaction. Let's now assess the pros and cons of operating as a product-based company, also commonly known as B2C, which we have mentioned before, which means selling products directly to the customers. So the obvious pro of B2C is having more control over the product and supply chain. You can have a direct say regarding all the logistical and operational aspects of the business, while also maintaining direct communication with the buyers, which is essential. By selling the product directly to customers, you may build stronger and deeper relationships with them, which may result in acquiring customer feedback to better understand your industry, product, and consumers. Additionally, being customer facing also oftentimes results in an increase in brand awareness. If the product performs really well on the market, awareness and recognition of your brand is anticipated to grow. With that being said, you may also capitalize on the acquisition of customer data and preferences. Lastly, we have exploration of technology. So by not selling the sustainable, innovative process of the activation tech, you can fully benefit from the competitive advantage it provides and establish market dominance. So even all of those sounded pretty good to me, but let's move on to some of the cons and see what's really going on. So the first major con is the need for resources, especially focusing on marketing and operational overhead costs. So these costs are not insignificant, and major resources will be needed for constant improvement, creation of new products or flavors, adapting to a constantly evolving market, longer and more articulated value chain, and a more complex management and operations. So you would be entering a saturated market with a very competitive landscape. Productions are highly fragmented, but still dominated by a few large distillers. And that same would apply to distribution as well. The top 2 distributors right now control more than 50% of the current market. Additionally, it is difficult to scale a product-based company as compared to moving forward initially with the maturation as a service-based company. Businesses that focuses on servicing their technology are easier and faster to scale due to lack of logistics, lower fixed costs, immediate distribution, and full control over the value chain. Lastly, customers are very hard to retain in this industry, and there is low brand loyalty. Younger generations' tastes and preferences are vastly different from those of older generations. Young consumers are keen to try new tastes, new flavors, they're open to try new drinks and alternatives. To reiterate, entering B2C is extremely risky and highly competitive. It is not the most desirable business model for you to utilize, considering that your highest value added is in technological advances, which can be capitalized through other business models. So now we're going to go ahead and turn to Zoe to explore the industry and some of our analysis and reasoning.
Thank you, Sharon, for an excellent job on explaining all the pros and cons of the three business models. So now let's dive into the analysis in determining the best course of the action for Bespoken spirits. We first need to look at the hard liquor and spirits industry as the whiskey and bourbon distilling segment within the industry. So over the past years, the whiskey and bourbon distilling segment has experienced stable growth, and this growth is expected to continue at a pace of 3.9% over the next 5 years. If we narrow the distilling industry down further to focus on whiskey distilleries only, we will see an even larger growth rate over the past 5 years of 6.1%. As you will see on the chart, the industry life cycle is considered to be in the growth stage. And that being said, it is important to know that the growth rate is expected to slow down significantly. What does that mean? By 2026, the industry's growth rate is predicted to be 3.1%, which is nearly half the growth we have seen in recent years. The market may be nearing maturity, and we will need to continue to monitor the industry trends in order to compete in longer term. So moving on, since the whiskey industry is on the growth stage, we conducted some charts just to show that whiskey is competing to be the most produced spirit in the industry. As you can see, the upper left-hand chart shows us that all of the volume of 9-liter cases produced in the spirit industry, whiskey makes 25%. Of course, vodka produces the most by volume, but if you look at the producer revenue chart in the right-hand corner, you will see that the whiskey produces significantly high revenues in millions of dollars. Lastly, the bottom middle chart clearly summarizes that this information and shows that although whiskey has fewer shares by volume, it has the highest shares by revenue among the spirits industry. Let's dive in a little bit more now on the industry. In order to determine the best course of action for Bespoken, we analyzed the spirit industry and broke it down further to look at the whiskey and bourbon distilling segment. We used Porter's 5 forces of industry competition, and that showed us that, first of all, the threat of new entrants to the industry and segment is really high, as the whiskey distilling industry is in a growth cycle. Small whiskey distilleries have proliferated rapidly across the country over the past 5 years and have increased at an annualized rate of 16.2%. The number of new entrants to the industry is expected to outpace the projected revenue growth, resulting in a spike in competition. Moving on to the bargaining power of suppliers in the whiskey distilling industries is also really high. So the price of key whiskey inputs such as grains and sugars can be extremely volatile, and a distilling business success depends on limiting the exposure on these shifts. So this is especially true for craft distilleries as they have smaller profit margins. Let's move on now to the bargaining power of buyers, which is wholesalers, retailers, and customers is considered to be moderate to low. So because of the industry is still in the growth stage and consumer purchases have increased in recent years, distillers can pass on the higher fixed cost to the end consumer. On the other hand, some large retailers, such as more bargaining power due to their market share and status among consumers. So the threat of substitutes now in the whiskey distilling industry is also high, as any other spirit or alcoholic beverage can replace whiskey as it provides the same benefit. Lastly, let's talk about the complements of the whiskey distilling segment, which includes the ice industry, the cola industry, and other industries that make signature mixed drinks or cocktails. Other complements can also include bars, nightclubs, the events industry, and holidays such as Father's Day and birthdays. So now I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption and a conclusion of everything that I just said. So the whiskey segment is very saturated. So there is a 2,000 craft whiskey distilleries. This means that if Bespoken were to move forward with the product-based business model, marketing costs would be upwards to $40 million. That's a lot. Because of the high competition, high cost of entry, and after throughout industry analysis of the business to consumer whiskey segment, we are confident that the Bespoken spirits will have higher profits and longer term success by targeting business customers and shifting to a technology-based business model. So moving on, we conducted a peso analysis on the B2B industry and discovered that these are going to be the 4 variables that will have the greatest influence on your business operation. Let's start with the legal factor. So alcohol distribution laws per state, they vary, and this would be a time consuming to analyze, but you might need to require legal consult to recommend taking into consideration all of the various laws. Moving on to the legalization of marijuana, currently 38 states have legalized marijuana for medical use, and the threat that marijuana poses to the split sector will increase as it's legalized in the nation widely. Liquor license per state, this is also really important. It is vital to know that each US state has its own laws and regulations regarding liquor licenses. Mississippi has the lowest fee charge, which is $55, and Texas has the highest one, which is $19,000. So let's now turn our focus on the economy for the year of 2019. Real gross domestic product climbed by 2.5% in 2019, while the GDP increased by 3.5% to $21 trillion. With 119 billion in economic activity and 1.64 million employees, the US Liquor and Spirits Business Economic Overview shows that these are some pretty good numbers, knowing that the economy and industry are expanding, and this will help your firm tremendously. So let's focus now on the social culture factor, which is really important as well, as millennials and Generation Z have a taste in alcohol, which differs from prior generations. They're more open to try more drinks, and they are attuned to rich and savory flavors. They like high price, high quality things, which is a process called premiumization. Millennials are twice more likely to modify their habits as previous generations. Lastly, we're going to talk about the environment because Bespoken preaches about the sustainability. So the distillation process has environmental challenges, as the barrels were often used only to make whiskey once. They could be reused for other types of spirits, but with much less impact from the aging process. By using activation technology, a producer can reduce their wood consumption by 97% and reduce also their energy by 99%. Another interesting statistic is that 48% of consumers said that it would alter their behavior if it meant bettering the environment. I'm going to pass it now to my colleague Valerio to continue the analysis.
Great. Thank you so much for the great analysis breakthrough. And I will continue by looking at the key success factors. We, in fact, can define 4 factors that will give your company competitive advantage. First of all, is the utilization of aging technology. This will drastically reduce the time necessary for distillation while also providing a better flavor profile, greater product customization, and cost savings due to less energy consumption and less deterioration of productive assets. Secondly, strong wholesale retailer network will also help you to acquire access to large distilleries for possible, eventual connections. Thirdly, clever marketing. This will assist to raise awareness of how unique your technology is around the world, and via your distinctiveness and smart marketing, you will be able to share your story. And thirdly, sustainable alternative. Bespoken patent planning approach has the potential to save the spirits industry more than 20 billion a year, help address the global environmental crisis, and keep up with consumers' fast-changing palates and their desire to have a greater impact on how they support green initiatives. I will now move on to a question that we had. Does the activation technology represent or not a sustainable competitive advantage for you? And to this extent, the VRIO framework came quite handy. So first of all, the disruptive activation technology is valuable. First of all, because it allows you to increase economic value creation. Secondly, is it rare? Yes, because since barely no other firms in the same industry possesses such a strong technology or a similar tool that would otherwise lead to a perfectly competitive state. Thirdly, it's hard to imitate, since it would require a ton of money time, efforts to try to replicate it. And thirdly, is organized to be exploited, since you have the capacity to exploit it and monetize on it. You file for 10 patents, the technology is there, and you're ready to capitalize on it. So therefore, because these elements are all simultaneously present and concatenated like in a puzzle, the activation technology does represent a sustainable competitive advantage for you, and you should exploit it. Now we'll move on a second question, which is like showing the structure of the maturation service. As you know, my colleague Erin already went over the maturation service value chain already, and she did an amazing job. But there are other three parts of the Magic Triangle, which is a tool that really helped us out and which have not been explored yet. And I will discuss the what, who, and why, and quickly touch on the who, since Erin already did an amazing job. First of all, who is the customer? What does Bespoken offers to the customers? Firstly, the customers are distilleries, breweries, and rectifiers. Secondly, the value proposition. What is the offer? You're offering customer a disruptive technology that accelerates the aging process while reducing production costs, allows a better control and customization over the final product, and enhances the flavor profile of the drink. But drastically shortening the productive and traditionally lengthy maturation process, Bespoken not only allows distilleries a significant cut on expenses, which we know everyone loves saving money, but also to capitalize on emerging consumer trend in less than 4 weeks, and sometimes as little as 1 week, and accelerate the time to revenue, time for money. Secondly, how the value chain, which Erin already examined, is very different than the traditional whiskey distillery value chain. She already went through it formally, and I will just quickly show you how the process would take place. And for this sake, this diagram will help me to show you visually how it works. So distilleries would ship their products to Bespoken in bulk, or eventually activators could be put directly on trucks and set up at the producer's facilities. You would then proceed to use the activation technology to catalyze the maturation process, and then send back the mature products to the producers and collect revenues. And the client will be happy as he will receive a ready-to-drink product. Why the revenue model? The maturation service cost would be between $2 to $10 per proof gallon, depending on the volume of mature product and the complexity of the recipe, of course, plus cost of shipping. An alternative scenario, as I already said, would be to put directly the activators on trucks and drive them and sending up them at the customer's facility. These second structures will yield gross margins ranging from 50% to 80%, depending on the price and experience. Now, I will take a sip of water before concluding the presentation. So to wrap it up, what did we learn? Why the maturation service is the way to go. First of all, it has to be acknowledged, the industry. Within the hard liquor industry, whiskey and bourbon segment is in a growth phase, and whiskey showed to generate the highest revenue among all spirits. And secondly, what are the benefits of the maturation as a service? First of all, competition is extremely high in the B2C industry, as we already said. Therefore, it will be very expensive to take up to, and it will take up to 10 years in order to see positive operating margins. Therefore, by focusing on the technology and focusing on B2B market, you will have an opportunity to capitalize on this growth without all the direct competition in the B2C market. Most importantly, this service will provide a solution to an industry need. The main problems, as we said, in the distilling industry are the long aging process, the high production costs and the financial challenges associated with this process, the lack of sustainable distilling options, and we all care about the environment, right? And the complex chemistry. Bespoken maturation service efficiently tackles each and every one of these issues, and this is amazing. Thirdly, the implementation. While we strongly believe that the best opportunity, as we already said, is to pursue the maturation as a service business model, we preventively plan also an implementation time and noted points where you can reevaluate the finances and also diversify into customization as a service. And then later on, why not diving on to B2C as well? And then cost analysis, as already well presented and explained before by my colleague Melissa, the cost analysis showed us that the model is financially sustainable. I'm not going through the cost breakdown again to not waste your time. If you have any question, please feel free to ask. But what we learned is that the numbers are there and the opportunity is feasible. And third, the tools, strategic tools are really important because they indicate that it's worth pursuing this opportunity strategically. And I will just quickly go through one of the tool again to show you, since we already spent a lot of time on analysis, just to show you. And I'm going to use RIO. This route activation technology is valuable, rare, hard to imitate, organized to be exploited. And the coexistence of these elements indicates that the activation technology does represent a sustainable competitive advantage for you, and you should monetize and capitalize on it. So to conclude, I would love to thank you so much for listening. If you have any question, please, we are here for this. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. We will be available for a consultation until Friday, June the 17th at 7 p.m.